Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Paddy Boy from Celtic World Order. Paddy Boy, Celtic World Order, welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. How you been?
Excellent, mate. Yeah, just been working away as you know, watching Celtic as much as possible and trying to rein myself in for buying all the merch.
Because you're a bit of an aficionado when it comes to Adidas, I believe.
I'm the Celtic da. If it's got a Celtic badge on it, Adidas as well. Yeah, I do like my Adidas. I'll throw my trainer up onto the screen here. I've got my Malmos on, but I like my kit. I like buying my gear, and I always have done. So this wee kind of boycott thing is absolutely tearing me apart.
You know, when we talk boycotts, and obviously the Celtic Dahin comes in because we remember the original boycotts in the 1990s. I think what the club need to realise is that see if things are going well and you feel as though the club are listening to you, there's a communication stream. This thing never comes into the equation. You never talk about boycotting anything Celtic related. I remember when buying direct for Celtic was the mantra. Yeah, I want my money to go to the club, even if it was a wee bit more expensive. But there are very few, the reason that's came into the discussion is there are very few things that guys like you, me and everybody else who watches Acsom can actually do as Celtic season ticket holders, match going punters, or people who go when they can go because it's hard to get a season ticket now. We don't have any say in the future of our football club, and this is why we are here today to talk about one of the biggest issues, which is recruitment. We've already spoken about the stadium.
Yeah.
We've spoken about the boards. So the stadium was your colleague, Steve-O.
Yeah.
The board was Tino from the Celtic Exchange. Today, you and I are talking recruitment. What did you make of the stadium thing? It was kind of prompted by the video that you and Steve-O did.
Steve-O phoned me one of the days, Wednesday as well. I was in Glasgow with my wife. Steve-O phoned and says, listen, I'm at Celtic Park, do you want to come and see us? Say, no problem. So we got away to drop me off, and he says, I want to highlight a few things here, what do you think? And we took a walk around first, and I was blown away by some of the stuff. It was just pure neglect. A lot of the things that you're looking at, I mean, you look at the banners going around the stadium and stuff, and yes, they were doing slight maintenance on a lot of the brickwork and whatever else, but there's still no excuse. The stuff was lying there. There was the old ticket office that's been there for 20, 30 years that's just lying out there. And then we're talking about getting a use of that footprint, a use of that space, doing a fan zone, stuff like that. And the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
And it gutted me a little bit, because when you go to Celtic Park as a fan, you're walking up that Celtic way and all the fans are there, and it's a kind of, not a carnival atmosphere, but you know, you get caught up in the atmosphere. And walking up it on a cold Wednesday afternoon, you see the deterioration. You see, bleak, mate, you see it, and you look at the statues and they're all like sticker residue and moss and stuff like that, and that shouldn't happen.
No.
Not at a club like Celtic. That stuff should be maintained. That was the day before the Braga game, and you've got away fans going to come and see that stadium, going to come and want to go around there and like experience it. What are they there to experience?
We always pride ourselves on it, don't we? We call it paradise. They need to show pride in it. Talking about even the statues, I remember going up, and it was when I was doing the Monday Wonder every week, and there was birds dropping, for want of a better expression, on Jimmy Johnston's head. And by the time I finished that series, it was still there. Now, I'm not going to climb up on a statue because, I mean, I could vandalise it or break it. However, that kind of thing, we need a maintenance programme, but we also need to improve on it. Now, people might be saying, I thought you were talking recruitment. The reason I brought that up because you went up there yourself, and it is difficult on a match day when the place is bustling with people. You don't see it as much. But all I would say to anybody tuning in, go on to Google Maps, type in Celtic Park, and look at the size of our footprint.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the size of it. Compare it to a lot of the English clubs, by the way, whose footprints don't exist. You know, they're slap bang in the middle of an estate or housing scheme, and they don't have the ability to extend or expand. You're talking their fan zones, kids zones, big screens, you know, the museum, the hotel. There's lots and lots that could be done. Celebrate the history. We've got a great history, let's celebrate it. So we will be talking a wee bit more about that until the CGI is launched. That is something that will take a few weeks, maybe months to organise, but we're working on it. But I want to talk to you about recruitment, and I want to talk to you about change. It's never too late to change your approach to recruitment. But I was looking at the statement from last year's financials, right, or the last set of financials, where they were talking about this recruitment model that they've got. They keep talking about a recruitment model, Paddy. In your view, what is our recruitment model? Because you could ask Hearts right now, they're in the news for how they're doing their data analysis when it comes to recruitment, not just recruitment, but also, player development. And they could tell you very specifically, this is our model. What is our model?
Nobody knows. Let's be honest. You can say what you want about Hearts and Mr. Bloom over there, but he came out and he sat in front of the press and said, this is my 10-year plan. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I am going to make Hearts. When was the last time you seen somebody at Celtic do that? Other than the message that we got for Lovell when they first come in. And the shoulder song, yeah, we get it. When Lovell first came in, he was there, he was fresh-faced, and we're going to invest everything in Celtic. We are Celtic fans the same as you, and all of this kind of stuff, but we haven't seen it. You speak about the youth programme and stuff like that. You just need to look at certain players. I mean, you spoke about one of the players earlier on, and you look at the pathways and players coming through. Who was the last person basically to break through from that squad that you can say made a notable difference? It's hard to pinpoint.
Very, very difficult, by the way, right? And I'm going to jump back in and out of that meeting that the collective had and I attended a few weeks ago, because you got some little snippets out of that in terms of how the club think, which is quite frightening, right? So the answer to your question there, they want, one of their mantras is to produce Champions League footballers. We're going to do a special on the academy further down the line, but it all jumps into the same kind of thing, because if you've got a system in place for recruiting players, that data analysis system can also be used for developing players.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the last player that came in and made an impact, if we were to go through the team, Paddy, right, and this is something I will do on the special when we do the deep dive, and say, right, when was the last goalkeeper Celtic produced that played 50 games for the club? Who was that? Let's look to the right back. Well, that's Tony Ralston. Yeah. Let's look to the left back. That's Kieran Tierney. What about the two centre halves? You're going a wee bit further back then. Yeah. You're probably looking at Stephen Welsh and Steve McManus. And you go through the team, and who's the last striker, seriously, to play 50 games? I'm talking centre forward, not Sean Maloney, not Mikey Johnson, striker, number 9. Was it Jerry Craney? I mean, it's pretty frightening if it was, right? But that's where we are with the academy. Now, you were just saying they're working away. We're working class people, right? If you were at your job for 20 years and you weren't coming up with your targets, you wouldn't have a job. Of course you wouldn't. But at Celtic, it's almost like a face fits. Yeah. So the academy structure, as well as the great facilities, the academy structure needs to be looked at. Got a wee bit of information on that. Apparently, Sean Maloney's tearing it up since he came in as the pathway manager. If that's the case, share the information. Yeah. Even if it's like a presentation, which apparently he is doing in terms of getting the buy-in from parents, which is a massive part of this, right? The parents need to know there's a pathway for their kids. Because if there's not, you'll end up at Watford, you'll end up at West Ham, you'll end up somewhere else, right? Liverpool, Bayern Munich. There's so many teams that they've chosen over Celtic because there's no pathway, right? But Sean Maloney's came in. Is it about an elite mindset? Now, people going to do elite managers. No, that's a different discussion. And at the moment, I'm not going to say anybody's the elite manager. An elite mindset where you have perhaps worked with elite coaches or at an elite level, and you can implement that mindset at Celtic. Because a lot of people are talking about Sean Maloney. Yeah. And what's he doing and why is he there and what's the impact? I'm hearing he's making a very, very big impact, positive impact.
Well, that's good. He's one of the guys, and you could, when it first happened, you go, oh, there's another job for the boys, put somebody else into a role. But Maloney was one I was quite excited about, because like you said, he's worked under Martinez, he's worked with Belgium, he's worked at loads of clubs down south, and he's been at a very, very high level. And he's very experienced, got all his tickets, and he's one of the ones that I thought, that's a decent appointment. I hope he gets a chance. And it seems to be that he is. It seems to be he's been given that opportunity, and it's grasping it with both hands.
I think the important thing is to implement something that continues once you've moved on.
Yeah.
Now, you might move on. Listen, he might move on to another position at the club. Who knows, right? Or he might go somewhere else and start running an academy. But if we're talking elite level, why not go to one of the elite academies down south and say, right, there's Paddy Boy, right? He's kind of number 3 at a Premiership academy, but he's choking to do his own thing. And he's lived and breathed this for 8, 9, 10 years. Bring him in. Implement what you're doing at one of these clubs up here at Celtic. Implement it. Give them the opportunity. We need to know where the talent is. But on your point about producing players, so the question at the meeting was around producing Champions League talent from the academy. And they were challenged on that. And you know what the answer was? James Forrest, Callum McGregor, Kieran Tierney and Dane Murray. All right. Dane Murray's played about 5 minutes in Europe.
Yeah.
Right? That was the answer. And that worries me a wee bit more, Paddy, because you're thinking, right, but that's an era of player now who are well into their mid to late 20s and into their 30s, other than Dane Murray, who's not played enough.
Yeah.
And that shows that we're not producing the players. So recruitment, whilst we're not producing players, which was always a benchmark of Celtic Football Club, whilst we're not producing players, recruitment becomes more important. So what is the strategy? You watch Celtic, you talk about Celtic, every nuance of it, you don't know, and I don't know. I think the strategy is this: throw enough darts at the board and you'll hit the bullseye. And see all the other ones that are hitting the wall and whatever else and hitting the door frame. That's your Speds, that's your Bankuras, that's all these other players that it doesn't work out for. But you can bring it right into the current squad. We've got a European game this week. This show goes out on Friday. We don't know the result at the moment, unfortunately, because this isn't live. But there's certain players in our squad that can't play in the game on Thursday, right? So I'm in the meeting. We'll get into the ins and outs and all the rest of it and the success rate of transfers. I'm in the meeting and I ask the question about the functionality of our recruitment strategy, because I'm like yourself, Paddy, I'm sitting there going, tell me. Maybe it's just that I don't know what you guys are. You are the experts. Tell me what it is I don't know, right? And I asked a simple enough question, which was around the recruitment being dysfunctional if we've got a talent spotter. This was their words, Paul Tisdale, talent spotter, right? He identifies the talent, and their words, Brendan Rodgers agrees to every single signing. I'm sorry, I don't believe that now. And the reason I don't believe it is because we've got 5 players that came in the summer who are not in the squad for the Europa League, right? I'll correct myself, 4 players: Simpson Pusey, Inamura, Shin Yamada, Callum Osman, not in the squad, right? The 5th player I was talking about was Ross Doohan, who will be one of the goalies in the squad. 4 guys, right, that come in. Now, they weren't all massively expensive signings, but the way I look at that, Paddy, is if they've 4 players have come in, they've been identified through our strategy, which we don't know what the strategy is, as talent. The gaffer signed them off, and the gaffer doesn't rate them. Is that functioning properly for you?
No, of course it isn't.
That was my question.
You look at it and you look at Simpson Pusey come up here. He's one player of the year down south playing the Man City B team, basically. He's come up, can't get sniff, and at the Celtic squad. You see him in training, he looks a bit of a unit. He's a big boy. Somebody I'd like to have in the squad. Somebody that's going to push strikers about a wee bit, because I don't think we have that in the squad at the minute.
Breathe down the neck of CCV.
Aye.
He needs it.
Of course he does. A severe kick right up the hoop is what he's needing. He's become too lackadaisical. You can see that in his passing. It's nonchalant and thinks he can just go out there and play with slippers and thinks the first day in the team sheet. And listen, we need people in there to pressurise that. He's picking guys like Shin Yamada and stuff. When Yamada was coming in, it was, this guy's faster than Dyson, he's going to be brilliant, he's going to cause havoc. I haven't seen it. The rest of them, I mean, you kind of get these guys coming in and you're going, right, this is going to be it, this is going to be a good one. They're nowhere to be seen, and it's worrying. Like you said, that's 4 players that we brought in that Brendan Rodgers would probably say is a club signing. It doesn't say it's a signing that we all agreed on. When he comes out and he's interviewed about it, he mentions the word club signing and stuff like that. Now, is a club signing different from any other signing, or is it that this is a wee bit? There's so much grey area that we need to get over. We need to get this out of the way.
We do. I had a very interesting discussion just before Brendan Rodgers resigned first time round. And it was with the guys from the Anfield Rap, phenomenal Liverpool channel. And they've always been really, really helpful to Acsom over the years. We were chatting away and we were at this event in Glasgow. And we asked them in relation to Brendan Rodgers, his recruitment hit rate, if you like, at Liverpool. And they explained to us that there was a committee who would organise themselves to decide on club signings. And then there was Brendan Rodgers signings, and there was a ratio insofar as the committee would get more bodies in the door than what Brendan would. And at that time, I didn't really like that idea, Paddy, because I always thought, maybe wrongly, maybe because I'm a bit old school, I always felt, well, the manager surely should be the guy signing the players. And maybe I'm looking back to a time when Jockstein and Sean Fallon jumped in a car and drove into a game and scouted a player themselves. And maybe I need to get over that. And I could get over it if that committee or our club had a system, had a strategy. And I don't see that. And we used Hearts because at least we know what that is,
Yeah.
right? So if we're bringing these guys in, throwing the darts at the board and hitting the skirting board and all the rest of it, what happens is we end up with a squad that isn't fully efficient. So for those 4 players who are not getting used, I'd rather have 1 player who was, right? I really would. And also what happens there is it's more efficient to do that. But at the same time, it's all about harmony within the squad. So there's 4 guys who are unhappy, right? There's also, if you put Osman and JSP in one bracket and say, there's guys coming up for Premier League 2, and you put the other 2 guys in it, there's 2 guys coming over for Japan.
Aye.
So what message does that send to the 2 markets in the future? You're actually saying, don't bother coming here because we'll not play you. Aye. So it's damaging. And it all links in. So we've spoken about the board, we're going to speak about the academy. If your academy doesn't produce players, you need to buy them. If you want to buy players, you need to have a recruitment strategy. What is it? And I honestly just think it is buy as many as you can, and every now and again we'll get a Van Dijk, a Wanyama, we'll get a Jota. And I think that is your strategy. That doesn't work. Because if the hit rate for 2 or 3 windows isn't high enough, you get into this situation that we are currently in, where there's not enough quality in the squad. So in terms of recruitment, I asked the question, and I gave the example of Simpson Pusey. I said, I'm pretty sure he never came up to play B-team football. And instead of answering the question, they said, we can't talk about Simpson Pusey, that's confidential. So instead of actually just, having the balls to say, actually, this is how we do it. We are using this level of data. At this point, the manager comes into the discussion with Paul Tisdale, and then he's presented with the scouting reports, etc., etc. How will the player fit into the team? One thing I loved about Ange is he then spoke to the player. So he spoke to Joe Hart, who had spoke to us a year before. He spoke to Paddy Roberts. He decided he didn't have what he wanted in terms of a mentality to bring to the football club, so he never signed him. Did he speak to James McCarthy? I don't know. That's another show in itself. So what is the strategy? The answer is we don't know what the strategy is. Now, there's a thing with Celtic as well where it's almost as if we don't want to give you too much information, we want to keep it all to ourselves. We're not asking you for wage, structures, brackets, and profiles of do's and don'ts because you're writing yourself out of a market and you make that public. But tell us how this works, because I don't think it's functional. And that example I gave there kind of shows that it's not functional. And it's not something that's just happened. It's not a new phenomenon, is it? No. It's why Brendan left the first time, Paddy.
You see me talk about Brendan signings and stuff as well. When Brendan came up here the first time, he brought in guys like Sinclair and players like that, guys that hit the ground running, guys that
Brendan signings,
because he's obviously worked with him previously.
Yeah.
You can look at it. There was obviously the talk about Raheem Sterling and stuff coming back up, and we were all like, right, that'd be another good one to come in. Ange done the same when he brought in his players, brought the players off of Japan, a market that we wouldn't have been anywhere near, unless he had come in and identified these kind of players. So you look at these and players getting brought in from manager signings. We've probably got a better strike rate since Brendan came in than obviously what we did previous, when you think about stuff like that. And like you say, it's just the structure, mate. It's all over the place. It really is. And we just need it set down there. We need it written in stone.
You know what? I think we're kind of amateur at it, because if we'll use Ange's example, we're going to go right back actually and have a look at trends and how this has developed to get to where we are. Because Celtic always, I think, blatted at themselves that they were very good at this.
Right.
They were very good at recruitment. Look at our track record. And they would show you all the players that they managed to flip for a profit, right? And it was a big part of their income stream. It's a big reason why we've got so much money in the bank and all the rest of it. But it's not as simple as that, right? And if you don't have a strategy, all it takes is for 2 or 3 windows for it not to hit the mark, and you don't get the same hit rate, and then you have such a lack of quality. So if you're Ange and you come in and you've got a specialist knowledge of the Japanese market and of Australian football, you can bring that to the table. But even that isn't enough. Now, what Tony Bloom has brought to Hearts, and Derek McKinnon spoke about it this week to Simon Ferry, is any player in the world, any player for any league, we can tap into their data. That's what we need. Now, if we're not doing that, and I think we do, and I think it's been touted about that we use Y-Scout and all the rest of it, right, so at what point did the system we use tell us that Kwon was a good idea, right? Now, again, I'm not going to completely write him off whether we chat about this, but I'm on your side to a degree. Engels doesn't fit Celtic.
Yeah.
At what point did a system say to us, spend 11 million quid on that guy, because he will fit? He doesn't fit, right? And then you start looking at the plethora of signings that have just never fitted our system. And maybe the 4 guys I've mentioned, we'll never see them kicking another ball for Celtic. There's another 4 failures. At the moment, 4 failures. We're still playing Yang at right wing. At what point did anybody think his data was such that he was good enough to play for Celtic, right? So bringing in Ange with specialist knowledge of 2 regions, oh, that's great. And by the way, his hit rate was brilliant.
Yeah.
But what about all the other regions, all the other thousands of footballers at our disposal that we could bring to the football club? Brendan Rodgers has got knowledge of 1 region, 1 market, and it's probably the most expensive market in European football. So we need more than any club to have something that's got a wider scope. Because when I look at the team that we're playing now, the team that got beat from Dundee, right? From top to bottom, Kasper Schmeichel in goals, Kelechi Iheanacho up top. What process was used, Paddy, to bring those 2 players to Celtic? Which structure was used to bring those 2 players to Celtic, who are both first picks?
Yeah.
What structure was used?
Ex-Leicester, innit? That's exactly what it is.
The Rodgers Rolodex.
Aye. And basically when it got to the end of the transfer window and we're sitting there, me and Steve were doing it live, and we're sitting and we're watching this and we're going, right, surely we're going to get somebody. And every single person that we're linked with, nope, they went somewhere else, nope, they went somewhere else. I think Fofana was the last one. He's decided to go Charlton or something, was it?
Aye.
And you're like, right, perfect. And I says to Steve, we're going to get hit with somebody that Brendan's worked with before here. And then, sure to God, it was Kelechi Iheanacho. And then you see all the things come out, he's not played for a year, he's extremely overweight and blah blah, and you just think this is just typical. And Brendan's had to dig into the old black book to try and find somebody here. And it was the same with Kasper, because Joe Hart had said he was going to leave 6 months prior.
Would you know?
Joe Hart's like, listen, this is my last season, thank you so much for everything you've done, blah blah blah, fantastic servant to the club. Surely then you put the wheels in motion to bring somebody in. But it seemed to be that Kasper was a rush job. Now, I'd like to think Celtic went to Kasper as soon as Joe said that, said, listen, will you come in, here's the details, blah, blah, go over that, get back to us. But I doubt it. I think it's been another one like, oh, Brendan, get that book out, have you got a keeper? Do you know what I mean? And it hurts to say, but I think that seems to sum up our transfer.
Shambolic. Now, by the way, I think Kasper Schmeichel, dividing opinion right now, but over the piece has been a good signing. In the actual, there's been certain elements of his game that I think great. No ideal the circumstances in which he came to the football club. But what I'm saying here is, I don't know how long Brendan Rodgers is going to be the manager, but who's the next manager? And when the next manager comes in, we can't just rely on that manager's specialist knowledge of certain markets. We need to widen the scope. And we're not doing it, regardless of what the club says, we're not doing it well enough, right? So we're going to go back to change and how change is reacted to at Celtic. So it's a big, massive buzzword in the corporate world, change and culture and all this kind of stuff. But it does affect Celtic. Now, during the week, and we'll relate this to how we behaved in the transfer market, during the week, I was talking about Celtic change. Because I think we're now at the cusp of another change. We need to embrace it. There's going to be another change. Because if we continue to go down the road that we've just been discussing, you know, it's a hit or a miss. It is a hit or a miss. We can win titles in spite of the system, which I think we've done since Rodgers came back in. So if we're talking about change, 94, a big one, right? Celts for change, save ourselves, boycotts. Fergus comes in like a knight in shining armour. And the more people I speak to, you know, who have a knowledge of that time, the more people say to me, Celtic will never go and bust. Don't you kid yourself. There were people there who were ready and waiting if the Fergus McCann thing didn't happen. So, but, you know, we know the story, we know how close it came. The day got called in, Fergus comes in. And we've spoken about his legacy of the stadium. But at that point, Paddy, for me, Celtic were pretty much a homegrown team. And I don't just mean through our own system, but, you know, when you look at the players that we purchased, it was pretty much, we didn't dip too much into the overseas market. I think up to that point, and this isn't an exact figure, we had signed Johannes Edvaldsson in 1975, with a couple of Polish guys coming in under Billy McNeil, Jack Oski and Duvcek. Rudy Vata came in under Liam Brady, but it was pretty much players from Ireland and Britain. That pretty much was, right, up to that point, and that's fine. There was one or two dotted around, right, but we did change when the takeover happened. So we did change our strategy, and we started scouting other regions. And that's you know, Tommy Burns was in charge by this point, and we're talking filing cabinets and files and all this kind of stuff. But that's where Pierre Van Hooijdonk comes into the equation, Andreas Thom, George Cadet, Pillow Di Canio. And then you've got others, you know, Enrico Annoni, and we completely change how we do business. Have you ever thought about it like that? So there was a big change in '94, but we also changed our strategy of recruiting players.
Aye, it's noticeable, like you says, when you kind of look back at previous sides, and predominantly Scottish, 67, obviously all Scottish, all within a 30-mile radius, but up until that point, there wasn't really many foreigners, as you'll call it, in there. But like the signing of guys like Pierre Van Hooijdonk and like the Cadet, icons of mine, because obviously that was the kind of era where me and Steve really started to enjoy watching Celtic, seeing these guys coming in, and it was a new age. It was something felt different, something that wee bit of change, and it gave everybody a wee kick, because we were fed up sitting watching, getting beat all the time, finishing third seasons, fourth seasons, do you know what I mean? And going into it, it was a point where you actually turned around and went, you know what, this is progression, this is where we need to go, because other teams were doing it.
Yeah.
So it was about time Celtic actually knitted into those kind of markets, and it was refreshing. It's something that we need to see again.
We need to see the change. Now, it did take us a while. I mean, you're saying other teams did it. I remember the Dutch boys at Aberdeen were bringing in, for example. They did really well, bringing in Hans Heelhuis, and there was a number of players at Dundee United, Freddie van der Hoorn, and of course Rangers were signing a lot of these guys. The reason we did it is because, again, going back to the point we made, we stopped producing players through the system, right? The last batch of players that I remember just kind of pre-Fergus was probably, you know, Brian O'Neill and Mark McNally and Jerry Craney, that type of player, Barry Smith. They came in, they made some impact, not a great impact. Tommy Burns also, and this is another thing we're not done enough of, he also utilised the Scottish market really well, I felt. I mean, although Vikhorst was obviously from Denmark, we bought him from Dundee.
Yeah.
We buy Jackie McNamara from Dunfermline. We buy Tosh McKinley from Huck. We did really well in the domestic market as well, but we opened up the scope about recruitment. And what that led to, because we actually got into the groove of that led to us eventually buying guys like Mark Creeper and Hermit Larson, and obviously up to that point we're chasing Rangers. So the change happens in '94, we're chasing Rangers. We've got to change our strategy, and we do. And we catch Rangers in '98. Now, I don't think catching Rangers was the big change. It was just like, we've caught them, right? So let's go again. Nobody's talking Europe. Nobody's talking European football at this stage. Couple of rounds here or there, trip to Paris to play PSG, roll with it, gets chanted after. But European football was miles away. We were miles off it at that point, Paddy. So I reckon the next big change for Celtic was reaching a European final in 2003 as a result of Martin O'Neill coming in 2000 and having a completely different mindset. What led us to the cup final? Changing our strategy in the market, because Martin O'Neill wanted to buy ready-made, in the wrapper, Premiership players on Premiership wages. So we changed again, didn't we? And it took us to 2003, and it took us to a European final.
Yeah, so that was the main investment part for me, as you see, kind of 2003, pumping maybe 6 million out on a player here and there. Your guys, your Petrovs, Lennon, Sutton, do you know what I mean? These guys buying in, like you said, ready-made players who are going to make an impact. And they were playing down south. It's not as if they were coming in from abroad and we're going to need time to knit in and stuff. These guys were ready-made. They come in and they knew what they had to do. A manager like Martin O'Neill. When I'd spoken to Diddy Agat, Diddy says, Martin kind of gave them a free roam. He said, you know what you can do, you know what you need to do, you know what you need to be. Go do it. All I'll ask is that you do this, you get the ball here. Slight bits of tactics, slight tweaks. But there was no man management, there was no, you need to be here. You see him sitting with wee books and moving players about and stuff like that. There's the gif of Ruben Almiron with his wee Subbuteo set and stuff like that. There's none of that. It basically said, you know your job, go out and do it. And he brought in players who knew he could trust in those positions, and that's what we got out of them. We got players who were comfortable in all of those positions and players that actually knew their job, and they went out and done it. Let's be honest, it was a fantastic time.
It was a great time. It was a great time, but a time of change. Our strategy changed. And I sometimes look at, Martin O'Neill gets plenty of credit, and so he should. First treble since Jock Stein was in charge of the football club. Took us into Europe beyond Christmas for the first time since 1980. The guy's a legend in my book and always will be. But there's two periods of his time at Celtic. There's pre-UEFA Cup final and post-UEFA Cup final where we change our strategy again. Now, the thing as well with Martin O'Neill, not only was he brilliant at bringing on guys that he had a relationship with, because he brings in Neil Lennon, who was a stalwart at Leicester. He tried to bring in a few of the other guys as well. If you remember, Matthew Elliott, the other one, Muzzy, is it? Emil Heskey, tried to bring somebody, Stan Collymore, tried to bring these guys to Celtic, but we get Lenny. But then he taps into a player who had been in English football, who needed the arm round the shoulder. Chris Sutton, career had gone off the boil at Chelsea. Alan Thompson's career had gone off the boil at Villa. And big John Hartson had failed, I think, 4 medicals. So he needed that inside knowledge of that market. Did it work? Of course it did. We win trebles. We get to a UEFA Cup final. Following the UEFA Cup final, interestingly enough, the club decide, nah, I'm going to go back to this David Lowe interview. Takes us up the hill, brings us back to... So we come back down the hill after that because of the spend. So up to Fergus taking over, we're chasing Rangers. We catch them, right? And by the time Martin comes in, we're winning leagues, but not every season. We're now competing with Rangers. But Rangers are spending money they don't have. We're spending money we do have. But if we continue to do it, we'll hit a brick wall as well. So we bring in Peter Lawwell in 2003. And then there's another change in strategy. So I think it affects Martin O'Neill's latter stage of his Celtic career, if you look at the signings that we were making, right? And then obviously a completely change of direction under Gordon Strachan. So when you look at the brilliant signings, as I say, I always separate into two. You've got, guys like Valharan, Baldy, Lennon, Hearts, amazing signings, right? Look at the second part of his time at Celtic, and we're bringing in Michael Gray, Stefan Honshaw, Henri Camara, Juninho. It does change, doesn't it, when you look back?
Yeah, when you name names like that, obviously guys like Juninho and Henshaw and some of these kind of guys, it kind of puts it into perspective. But like you said, we then kind of move on into the kind of Strachan years, and that again was a kind of restart, another rebuild that we've seen coming in. Obviously, like you say, Law's been brought in to tighten the books a little bit to make sure that we don't go the same way that the other side did. And we see that, and we see a lot more Scottish players, a lot more homegrown guys coming in again, and I'm a fan of that. And we used to be quite, not famous for it, but going around, we were brilliant at it, the SPFL teams, and going, oh wait a minute, let's bring him in. You look at Dundee United one of the years as well, brought in like Zaluska, Chiefchi, Gary Mackay, Stephen, guys like that. I mean, we were just basically going to teams and picking off the best players. More so they didn't score against us, which I thought we should have done with Majowski before he obviously signed for them as well. I thought when he played for Aberdeen, we should have got him. And sure to God, like you see the first game back after January, he scored against us. And it was always going to happen, in my opinion. And I like how that keeps progressing. And obviously throughout the years, we've started to see it. And Gordon Strachan, for me, was the first one that actually came in and started to kind of get more of the homegrown guys in, started to kind of progress that way.
He did. And another interesting point about the change in 2003 is we stopped buying players for the here and now. So see all the brilliant guys that we've mentioned there, we never made any money off them. There was no selling profit on the likes of Alan Thompson, Chris Sutton. We lost money on them all, but we were successful. So as fans, I don't think Celtic's a bank. I know that you've got to deal with the nickel and dime. I get it, right? But that changed in 2003. We started looking at players differently. And it was about, can we make a turn on him? Could we flip him for a couple of million quid? Gordon Strachan done incredibly well. But it's at Gordon Strachan's time that I can start tapping into managerial involvement in transfers. Because Martin O'Neill obviously had more than the final say when he was in charge. No doubt about it. Unfortunately, what happened was the players that he maybe wanted post-2003 wasn't getting them. And, you've got the famous story of bringing in Rivaldo for a trial, and Della Pena and Danny, and we weren't getting the players that maybe were the quality that we needed. I mean, who did we replace Henrik Larsson with? We replaced him with Juninho. Juninho, who, by the way, was an absolute starlet for Middlesbrough. World Cup winner with Brazil, but he was at the tail end of his career. He was never going to make the same impact because we didn't have a strategy. So we had to say, right, who do you know about down south, or Juninho and Middlesbrough? Middlesbrough played Leicester in the cup final, the FA Cup, the League Cup final that Martin O'Neill won. He knew all about Juninho, but that was many, many years before. So we start looking at guys that we can make a turn off as well. But Gordon Strachan is less involved in the signing process. And the only reason we know that is because we speak to him. I'm like yourself, Paddy. Like you've spoken to Excel, you just want to know.
Yeah.
It got to the point where Strachan was a bit tired of the process of signing players. So there would be players that came to Celtic that he had no real dealings with. And the famous one, is quite a funny story, is Paddy McCourt, of course. Inexpensive signing, but he turns up for training, Strachan doesn't know who he is. Right? So you're the manager of the football. So I can kind of take this involvement and meddling probably back to Strachan. You know, because if you're a football manager, you've got to know who's playing for you or who's part of your squad. There were other examples of that. Obviously, when a player like Roy Keane comes to the football club, Gordon Strachan didn't identify and push for Roy Keane to come to the club. And by the way, I loved Roy Keane. Absolutely loved him. I wish we'd got him a few years earlier. There is that game against Rangers that he plays that every single time he touched the ball, he was magnificent. Is it healthy? Well, Gordon Strachan proved, I believe, that if you're in on that as the manager and you agree to that and you're happy with it, it can work. Because, I mean, look at the success we had. 3 in a row, 2 last 16s in a row. Successful manager, probably overstayed his welcome by 1 season by his own admission. But he was hoovering up domestic talent as well. Right? So we're still competing with Rangers. And what I'm saying about that is it was a pass the parcel. Even in O'Neill's time and during Strachan's time, we're still competing with them. But let's go to some of the bloopers, the blooper reel, right? The 4th season, the Willow Flood transfer window. He's the patron saint of January transfers, Saint Willow Flood, where we could have gone for Stephen Fletcher. And I get as well, Paddy, when you're talking like this, people say, oh man, all of a sudden he's Maradona and all that. No. If you look at how we lost that league, it was draws, second half of the season. And you look at the goals that he scored, Stephen Fletcher, and you think even 2 draws being converted into 2 victories, with that 1 signing, we win the league, right? That breathed life into Rangers survived for a couple of more years because they went on at that point to win 3 in a row, right? So talk about pass the parcel. So you had Strachan's last season, Mowbray's season, Lenny's first season. Rangers win all 3 leagues. We should have won 4 in a row. And I think it came down to recruitment.
Well, listen, you talk about Willow flooding guys like that coming in. That happens so many times. And you could basically rewrite this season upon season upon season. You get to a certain stage and you bring in one of these guys who, like, it's a rush sign. It's one of these ones that if we went for this one, if we went for that one, it's all touch and go, isn't it? Like you say, bring in Fletcher, 2 wins. That's it. You've made it. It's just, for me, it's a kind of laughable process, but it just keeps going on. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we keep doing it. We're going all the way back here. You're going back to 2003, which was probably the last time where we actually went out and spent your 6 million here, your 6 million there, blah, blah. Yes, it was money that at that time we didn't really have. But if you get it through to the 2008, 2009 period, like after Mowbray and stuff like that, if you start to see then this new investment coming in and starting to make a bit of money, surely you need to then put your foot on the gas and not take it off, because it seems to be like the kind of Strachan era towards the end. It was like, yeah, we're doing all right here, let's just let it run out. Kind of like what's happening here with Brendan. We've done the exact same thing. We go, yep, that's fine, we're coming to Brendan last year, take your foot off the gas. Whereas we shouldn't, because if the shoe was on the other foot and it was the team across the city, they wouldn't do it. They would get the foot down. And that's what we need to do. We need to break that system. We need to break that mould and just push on and start going for it. Start making Europe the go-to and not a bonus.
Has got to be the go-to, you're right. Compete rather than participate.
If you look at it, if you say like the Champions League money this year, £40 million, right? Now, if you're the CEO of any company and you're responsible for losing your company £40 million, are you going to be in a job?
I know. And your boss says to you, why did that happen? Well, we had 3 deals lined up, but I never got them over the line. That's all right, son. Better luck next time.
Aye, exactly.
How does that work, Paddy? The other thing I think during Gordon Strachan's time that we saw the introduction of was the marquee signing. A lot of people think a marquee signing is the best signing or a big... I think differently. I think, you know, Roy Keane was a marquee signing because we could never have got him when he was in his prime. He's a massive name. He's a blockbuster signing. He's a fans turning up at the stadium style signing. But maybe not the best signing if you look at it. So these types of players are presented to a manager. And I think we saw the beginning of that with Roy Keane. I think we've seen it with Tommy Gravison.
Yeah.
And then later when Mowbray comes in, we've seen it with Robbie Keane as well. How much of a input does the manager have into these types of signings? I'm not sure there's much of an input.
You see the Roy Keane and the Robbie Keane kind of thing, obviously Celtic fans and wanting to end their career at Celtic, wanting to come up and have a wee showboat in the Scottish leagues and stuff like that and say that they got a chance to play for Celtic. And yes, it's all nice, but let's be honest, it's stuff you put in the back of birthday cards, isn't it? It's well done, mate. Yeah, you come up and you've done a job, but I'd much rather have somebody that's going to come in and improve my team, somebody that's going to come in and get the boot down. I'm not saying Roy Keane and Robbie Keane never done this. Listen, they come up and they've done a job, but there were better people who could have fitted into those positions.
And more long term. And guys that come in who benefit the club whilst they're here, but also when we sell them on. So I've seen the introduction of that. I'm going to touch on it. So we know for a fact Paddy McCourt wasn't signed by Gordon Strachan. We know that because Paddy's told us and Gordon's told us. Right? So we've even got it for two sources, right? We move into the Tony Mowbray era. And I've never spoken to Tony Mowbray. I liked him as a player. I think during that period, I've probably seen the vast majority of his games, barring away European ties. I've seen a lot of Tony Mowbray's football. Loved the fact that, you know, he introduced the huddle to Celtic. So even though not a great player for Celtic, right, there was an affinity. So he comes back as a manager and he had this idea of a football utopia, and it was about entertaining football, wanted to play with two wingers. You know, he wanted to play with Maloney and McGeady on the wing and all this kind of stuff. But let's concentrate on his signings. The identity of player was just not there, right? It was like we were signing players from all over the place. You then start to wonder what was our scope? Yeah. Did we have data-driven functions back then? I don't think so. Were we relying on agents? Probably, right? Because I think Marc-Antoine Fortuny was probably a Tony Mowbray signing, right? Because he had knowledge of the player. He probably was. But other guys, I mean, what did he know about Landry and Guemo? What do you know about him? Josh Hoyvelt.
So young.
All these
guys like that.
What did he know about them? He didn't know anything about them, right? And also, when it came down to it, we signed a guy called Danny Fox, who I thought performed pretty well. He ended up a Scotland cap. But here's where it gets a little bit grimy again, right? Because we've heard that the club are signing players under Strachan. They're signing players under Mowbray, and we get that from one of Mowbray's management team, because Peter Grant talks about it. He talks about it. So players are getting signed from under their nose and sold. So the two examples I can give you with the selling of players. Danny Fox, he comes in and we make a quick profit on him. Right? And it's no massive. We're not talking 5 million quid here. We make a quick profit and he's away. And he was performing pretty well for Celtic. The other one was Massimo Donati. Now, by all accounts, right, and I can't remember it at the press at the time, but the press maybe didn't know this, Celtic were willing to let him go back to Italy on a free when Tony Mowbray comes into the football club. But Mowbray sees something in Donati that Strachan didn't see whilst he was a player, starts playing him, and he starts performing pretty well. He scored against Arsenal in Europe. And we get offered a fee. Mowbray and Grant want to keep him. He's gone. So not only are players now coming, we're now selling your players as well. That interference, that meddling, I think it started under Strachan, it continued under Mowbray, but going back to what Brendan says, if the results are not right, it's the manager that gets the sack, and that's what happened.
And that's it. At the end of the day, when you look at the guys that went out under Mowbray, guys like Naka as well, all of these guys kind of leaving, and we look at a list there like McDonald, Caldwell, Nakamura, Jan Vennegoor, Hesselink, Hartley, McManus, Boric.
That's the crux of Strachan's team,
That's a ridiculous amount of team to go out there. I mean, you'd feel that. Do you know what I mean? That's the team you would put out, and for a manager to lose that, like you said, probably from under his nose, because there's no way he's going to turn around and say, yeah, it'll be okay to get rid of him, it'll be okay to get rid of him. That could all have been done for underneath him. And at the end of the day, he's the one that gets the stick, and he's the one that ends up losing his job over it. And it's not right. It's really something that needs to be looked at here, and people need to understand that the board should not have this much power. when a manager comes in, I want to see a manager come in, like you said, identify players and say, these guys are going to improve this position. These guys are going to improve this position. This is my first choice. This is my second choice. I'll take either one of them. Good luck.
Right, there's another thing, but that's when I jump onto the Ronnie Deila era via John Collins. I'll talk about choices, and who you want, who you don't want, and then you turn up and they've been signed. But in relation to that, here's two guys from Peter Grant that they did want to sign. The first one, in the summer, Robbie Keane. Second one, Olivier Giroud. Two players that Celtic wanted to sign, right? And the Robbie Keane link comes through Granty during his time down south. They know each other, and he contacts Peter Grant directly and says, can a deal be done? When he heard that Mowbray and Granty were coming to Celtic, can a deal be done? They speak to the club, they're told, no chance. Wages are too much, can he be doing this? We're talking about a season-long loan. That happens in the second window of the season, when everything's gone. That's when that happens. The Giroud one, he wrote about it in his autobiography, talking about the fact that Kilmarnock were used as an example. You don't want to go to Scotland and play against Kilmarnock, do you? So they wanted him, they identified him, and that was before he became the superstar that he clearly did become. So if you're a manager or you're part of a management team and you've got players getting bought and sold from under your nose, unless you've signed up to that, it's not going to work. It's not functional, mate. There's somebody with a spreadsheet making a decision, right? And that's exactly what happened. Some of the names you mentioned there, you thought, we could get a tune into these guys. And by the way, they're no blameless. I thought Mowbray's time at Celtic was a disaster, right? I think his biggest mistake was the fact that he took two centre-halves, one of whom was the club captain and one of them was Scotland's Player of the Year, and he didn't fancy them. So Caldwell gets sold, McManus gets loaned out to, I think, Middlesbrough. And you're tearing the kind of heartbeat out your defence. No fancied, by the way, but two guys that got us to two last 16s. So, you know, if you're going to do it gradually. Don't tear the heart out your team. So, yeah, they were to blame, but the recruitment didn't help. And we're talking about changes. We're still passing the parcel with Rangers at this point, right? So, just a recap. Fergus comes in, we're chasing Rangers. O'Neill comes in, we're competing with Rangers. Strachan comes in, we're competing. Mowbray comes in, we're not even competing. And then Lenny takes over, right? So, let's look at the makeup of Lennon's first period at Celtic. Quite successful when you talk about a player trading model, isn't it?
When I've got a list here as well, I'll keep referring to it. Kind of Hooper, Kayal, Stokes, Commons, Wanyama, Lustig, Rogic, Van Dijk, Forster, Pookie and Armstrong. And that's players that came in under Lennon at this kind of stage. And you look at some of those guys. Virgil van Dijk obviously doesn't need any explanation. We know what that guy's done, we know what he's went on to do. But guys like Gary Hooper and stuff, we done a show previous and it was talking about the best players since Larsson. And when you look at statistics wise and percentages for
Goals per minute and all that.
Stuff, Gary Hooper's there.
He's up there.
He's right up there, and he's a player that you wouldn't really put in that. People talk about Ward and Bailey, Edward, and name loads of them, but Gary Hooper was the one that was, I think he was the closest. And what a tune we got out of him. And other guys as well, like you say, poaching the Scottish kind of players. Anthony Stokes, bringing guys like this, guys like Victor Wanyama. I mean, where did he come from? Do you know what I mean? That was one that we just kind of plucked out of this guy and went straight into this squad and was incredible. Do you know what I mean?
I know, but he used to listen to us when he was on the transistor radio in Kenya, apparently. I remember being at a game at Firhill, and it was the big thing around it was a friendly. Friendly match where you're desperate for football during the pre-season. And he was pretty much unveiled that day, but Izagiri was coming back from a leg break and he all turned up. You could just pay at the gate and all that. It was mobbed. Rasmussen was playing centre forward. Oh my God.
Hideous.
So the list you gave us was good, but there was a lot of hideous signings in there as well.
I've got them on there, but I kept the ones quiet.
Give us a few. Give us a few belters. Rasmussen was pretty poor. Bangura.
Mo Bangura, yeah. We got big Daniel Majstorovic as well, whether you love him or hate him. He was one of the ones that was in there. A team of Pookie. I mean, what did Pookie do? Do you know what I mean? Pookie was one of these ones, and he come up here full of promise. And now you look at him, so went down to Norwich and he was an absolute icon. But that refers back to what I always say, the Celtic jersey's heavy. And I always use Mikey Johnson as an example of that. And I know I shouldn't, but I kind of pick on him a little bit with it. Mikey Johnson's a great player, incredible player, but not for Celtic. He was one of these guys, I think he wanted to do too much. I think he wanted to try too hard. and it always seemed to go wrong for him. And Pookie, I think, was maybe one of these guys that being expected to win every single week, he couldn't handle the pressure. And I think that goes down. You could highlight a lot of players that's happened to, but Teemu Pukkie's probably the main one for me on that.
Pookie, right, in terms of not the style of player, but what happened before Celtic and after Celtic, reminds me a wee bit of Bratback, because he was very successful before he comes to Celtic and thereafter. But that wee bit just didn't work out. Pookie is a good answer to a pub question. 3 players who have played for Celtic who are also the top goal scorers for their country. And he's the one nobody ever gets. The other 2 are Dalglish and Robbie Keane.
Wow.
Right. So there you go. Keep that one under your hand. Maybe knows the answer now, by the way. Right. So interestingly enough, I look at the time that Neil Lennon spent at Celtic first time round, and you think, right, so what was the strategy, right? Well, through speaking to Big Mialby, so we're done our homework. Speaking to Big Mialby, they did scout a lot of their own players. There was clearly a relationship with agents, because where are you pulling Kajal from? You know, there was a relationship. Izagiri, what's your knowledge of that market in that region? I'm not so sure. But I'll tell you what he was very good at, getting guys from second tier championship football in England. He was brilliant at that, right? So Joe Ledley comes up, Adam Matthews comes up, Chris Commons, Gary Hooper, even Foster at the time, Newcastle were a championship club. He was very, very good at that. And the reason I believe that he was good at that is that he had Jim Melrose doing his scouting for him. Melrose was an ex-Celtic player, and at that time was Neil Lennon's agent, and he was doing a bit of scouting down south, and he was looking at all these guys directly. Great knowledge of the market. So I look at the Neil Lennon time, I think full credit. Yeah, there's a lot of duds. There are a lot of duds. But full credit, and as I've said on Acsom a number of times, him and Mialby did the scouting of Van Dijk. As well. So brilliant bit of business. Brilliant bit of business. You didn't mention one though, a big, massive omission, Dirk Boerigter.
Yeah, listen, Steve brought up Dirk Boerigter, and that was a loss. That was a main loss. Another guy who came in full of promise.
I know.
He's one of these guys, rapid, he's going to cause defences terror, and he'll do this and do that. I didn't see it. It's one of these guys. I think I even the Boerigter in one of my tops at one point, do you know what I mean? And gutted.
The thing is as well, a player with a bit of calibre. I mean, he comes from the Ajax setup. But when I look at that, I'm trying to think of changes, and I'm trying to think of strategy. What was the strategy? Well, Neil Lennon was fantastic at plucking guys out of the championship. He was brilliant at that. And we clearly had a bit of a scouting network at this point, even to the point where your assistant is going out just to double check on Van Dijk. And I think also this was the real advent of using agents. We were bringing in a lot of agent-promoted signings, weren't we? Because otherwise, who was the guy that played for Mexico? His name escapes me.
Fran Suarez.
Suarez. Yeah, we had him, and you know, you don't know about the regions, so you're relying on agents there. I don't think we were tapping into data at that time. But interestingly enough, and I will go back to this because it's just information that we've tried to gather over a period of time, things were happening behind the scenes and behind the management team's back. So the one example I'm going to give you is Joe Ledley. So we had Joe Ledley up last year. Sold without Neil Lennon's permission, if you like, if you want to call it that. He scores against Kilmarnock in his last game for the football club. Comes to training on a Monday, and Lenny apparently bangs on a window and says, "In you come." And Ledley goes, "What did I get up to at the weekend? Oh no, I'm in trouble." Don't train. What do you mean don't train? I was sold you. You know, he didn't want to go. When he was telling us that story, I'm not joking, he glazed up. He was tearing up, right? So that is what Neil Lennon was also dealing with at the time. And so it was definitely, there was a lot of meddling going on. So there's players getting bought through agents that Lenny probably didn't know about. But when it's a Kajal or an Izagiri who were fantastic, and if you're going to get a hit rate 2 to 3, no problem, you'll take it, right?
Some of the guys that get put out as well, I was saying like Sammy, Key, Wanyama, Hooper, you say Ledley as well. These are the guys that get put out. I mean, I don't think, if you're a manager, you're not going to agree to sell Samaras. Well, you probably would at that point. I loved Sammy. I was one of the guys that I thought Sammy was incredible in the big game. But the small games, he obviously wasn't really up for it. But I mean, that's guys that you wouldn't really agree to get rid of.
No, I think there's a story to be told with the Samaras one, you know, because he was no cryptic, but he didn't say too much himself when he was asked. He said he wanted to stay at Celtic. And did he not say something about the gaffer wants to keep me? So maybe he's another one who's been sold just to get him off the wage bill. You know, maybe he's at that sweet spot where you're not ever going to make any more money from him, so let him go. So a bit of meddling happening here. But this is during that period, Rangers die. So we're no longer chasing or competing. We're basically out on our own at this point. And how do we react to that change? So the big changes, 94, 2003, 2012. How do we react to that change? We don't.
Exactly.
That's my answer. We don't react to it. Some of the guys you mentioned there, Neil Lennon takes us to the last 16, we play Juventus.
Yeah.
That's following the victory against Barca, big famous victory against Barcelona. What happens to that team? We sell it. We sell Foster, Wanyama, Hooper, Kelvin Wilson. We sell them. We basically bank the money. Why? Because we're waiting on Rangers coming back.
Yeah.
That's. And for me, at the time, Paddy, it's great. We're in the last 16, brilliant. We're winning everything. We're going for 10 in a row. Our focus as fans wasn't right. But I'm not blaming fans. I was there. I'm just thinking, just win it and win it and win it. We were waiting for Rangers to come back as a football club.
Yeah.
We were not progressing, were we?
No, and that's the thing. I always refer back to it. At that point, we should have said, right, get the foot down. This is when we start to invest. All that money that you brought in for those kind of players, reinvest that in the club. Make the Champions League football the be-all and end-all, because let's be honest, you're going to qualify for it every single year now. So go for it. Why not put the boot down and actually invest 30 million?
That was your time.
Of course it was. That's the time when you put the boot down and go, right, this is when we go, this is when we push. Let's put them to the sword. And if we'd done that then, there'd have been no chance, mate.
We would not be having this discussion right now.
Of course we wouldn't. Because they do see, what is it, one failed transfer window's 5 years to recoup or something like that. It was probably you that told me that.
It was Gary Neville talking about even at his level with Salford, yeah.
So that kind of stuck with me, and I thought, that was your failed window. That was your failed chance, because we took the foot off and we went, all right, so we don't need to invest. They're not there. Aberdeen aren't going to do much. And it was that point, and you can laugh looking back, you laugh or you'll greet, one of the two, but at that point was when we should have just pushed on. That for me was the pivotal point in the last kind of 10 years, basically, when we should have just went, right, let's go, let's do it.
I agree, and it's on the back of change, isn't it? Yeah. So we had to change and adapt, and we didn't. When Neil Lennon leaves, for whatever reason, I think Neil Lennon has said himself he's taken it as far as he could take it.
Yeah.
At that point, which showed a lack of ambition in terms of those upstairs. We try to bring in Roy Keane. Big, you know, I think to keep the fires burning in terms of the interest levels, we'll bring in a big name. I think that was the thinking of that.
Yeah.
Ronnie Deila had already been discussed as a potential number 2 for Lenny for the season that Lenny left. And because of what happened with Roy Keane, Ronnie Deila ends up getting the job, right? So we then talked to John Collins. I have interviewed Ronnie Deila post leaving Celtic. It'd be interesting to see what he says now, actually. Let's bring him over for a live event. That'd be a good one, aye. He'll be back in Europe soon, I think. He's just got his books. So John Collins then starts talking about because this is where I think we go back to Mowbray times and worse when it comes to recruitment.
Yeah.
So you look at some of the players that came in under Ronnie Deila's tenure, and you think to yourself, who was a Ronnie Deila signing?
Aye. I mean, back to the list here. I'll go
let's have a look at the list.
My list on here, mate. You got Stefan Skepovic. You've got Armstrong, Christie, Mackay, Stephen, Griffiths, Sviatchenko, Johansson, possibly Ronnie Deila one. Boyata, Aya, possibly. Josef Simunovic, Sifty, Denier and Guidetti on loan. Guys, I mean,
so we're tapping into the City group here, aren't we, with Guidetti and Denier? No doubt about that whatsoever. But when you're looking at some of the signings later on, and the two that always come up is Kazim Richards and Carlton Cole, right?
Yeah.
And I think back to those times, and I'm asking John Collins a question, because I'm like, why on earth were these two guys at a football club, right? And John Collins says, well, at that point we are using data. He confirms we're definitely using data, and at this point we need a striker, and we are presented. So we say, Ronnie Deila and John Collins say we need a striker, and they're presented with half a dozen strikers. Carlton Cole's 5th or 6th on that list, right? And they say, no, we don't want him. Call him Kazim Richards. Not only was he 5th or 6th on the list of players, right? Collins had knowledge from him down south as being a bit of a tearaway in the dressing room. like someone that you don't want a bit of a bad egg. So Collins actually says to the club, we definitely don't want him. So Cole's not bringing the quality. Kazim Richards is just going to be baller. We don't want any of the two of them. They come into Celtic, but they come into Lennoxtown and the players have been signed. And that was how we were operating at that time. And that's coming from a member of the management team. So it's true. You know, it's not as if we're making this up because we want to have a dig at Peter Lawwell or whatever. So the club are now ruling the roost. And they've got a manager in place who they can dominate in Ronnie Deila. And what happens is the football's not great. The challenge doesn't exist. European football's disappearing over the horizon and people stop turning up. We know what happened in the semi-final. It hurts Dermot Desmond's ego more than Kairat Almaty. Really? Seriously? Because if that doesn't hurt your ego, I've seen no reaction from Dermot Desmond from getting knocked out from a Kazakhstani team in the Champions League. But the Rangers semi-final hurt his ego, so he goes out and gets Brendan Rodgers. Rangers come back into the league, we're lording it up, we're going for 9, we're going for 10. Europe isn't really in the equation, is it? No. But when Rodgers comes in, he's a stronger manager, and we actually not bow to his every want or need, but we sign players that he wants. There's no doubt about that, and a few that he doesn't.
That's signing players that the manager's got no idea of. That just, mate, I can't get my head around that. It's crazy. And you speak about, like, obviously Colin saying, yeah, we don't want these, we don't want them. That's coming direct from guys who have worked under this board, and they're saying, yeah, this is happening. And it's still happening to this day. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so they'll sit there and they'll shrug their shoulders as much as they want, mate, but they've got to take ownership of this. Yeah. They've got to sit down and say, yeah, we've made a bit, a muck up of this. We're the ones that have messed up here, and they're not going to do that. At the end of the day, the buck is going to fall with the manager, and he's going to be blamed for this. And Brendan Rodgers' tenure now obviously coming to an end. If, by all accounts, we don't pull this together and win this league again, that's going to fall on him. And I mean, that's not the way his tenure should have ended. This coming back and being
sorting out his legacy.
Yeah.
See, the thing as well, right, if we talk about Brendan Rodgers, the reason he left first time round, right, was because of recruitment. He spoke about it when he comes back. Yeah. So he goes away and does his thing with Leicester. The reason he left was the recruitment, where he was being presented with, his words, players who were at that end of the scale, and he wanted guys at that end of the quality scale, right? Sved is the guy we always talk about, right?
I love Sved.
He did not sign Sved.
Who come back and had a blinder against us again.
It always happens, eh?
It always happens. You spoke about Brattbakk earlier on. I remember Brattbakk coming back for...
Even Bangura played well against us.
Was it you and Berget as well? That's any of these guys who, like I said, pulled on a Celtic jersey and were...
Mate, the latest one was Lagerbielke.
Lagerbielke, mate, how good was he?
I know. Colossal was the description. So he leaves for this reason, but he's promised we're better now. Oh, we're much better now at recruitment. It's not going to exist. Yeah. He's been sold a dummy. It does exist. First transfer window, 9 players in. I think Yang and Bernardo are the only 2 that are still at the football club. A shambles. Some of the guys are still on the books, out on loan. And it might be the reason why he leaves. It might be the reason why he looks done in press conferences now, because he's just tearing his hair out. He wants this player. He's not getting anywhere near that player. And he's presented with the option of a guy who knows well outside the transfer window who's never free agent. It's a shambles for a club who in February were playing Bayern Munich for, you know, the last 16 of the Champions League. And the only kind of anomaly through all this is a 2-season period under Ange. And I said this during the week, the CEO changed, the manager changed, the outlook changed, right? And we done deals, not just from the regions he knew, because yeah, he did know the Japanese league. Of course he did. He didn't know Matt O'Reilly. Yeah. Didn't know Kyle Starfelt. You know, he didn't know a lot of the guys we brought in. I mean, what do you know about Leo Labada? But we were bringing in guys who hit the ground running, Yakimakis, Juranovic. It was just one player after another, 1 or 2 here or there, but it completely changed. So what do? We, 72 days in, get rid of that CEO and we revert back to type. And when we revert back to type, in my view, Paddy, we signed 2 decent players, and it's Alistair Johnston and Moy. And Moy's a Rolodex signing. He knows about him you manage him for Australia. So we know that the trend is the people who are at the football club, be that the guy who's got more shares than anybody else, buying players, dominating transfer proceedings, putting a cap on signings. Luke McCowan, 800 grand to £1 million. He's got more change lying down the back of his couch. Yet the CEO's got to phone him to okay that. It's ridiculous. Where do we go from here? So I'm seeing at the moment a CFO and a CEO who will pull in about £1.5 million once the finances come out, right? Between the two of them.
Wow.
Right? You could have a crack team, a 10, working on transfers all year round, right? And get this thing up and running. Yeah, you need a CEO, yeah, you need a CFO, but not to that level. They're feathering their own nest, Paddy. We need to get real when it comes to our vision. Our vision needs to be Champions League club, 10 games a season, that's your target. We've failed miserably this time round. Are the club willing and able to make these changes? Because 94, 2003, 2012, this is the next big one. This is the next big change. Will we make it?
I doubt it. You speak about these people who are running the club, and who's the football man in there? Who is the person there who knows the football? Like you say, they're financial guys, accountants, they're this, that and whatever. They're not really football men. And when Don Mackay came in, yes, he came from a rugby background, but he came in with a business acumen. He came in, he knew what he was talking about, and he knew how to run something this big. And I thought he'd done a great job. He come in and yes, he might
have even mentioned Jota and Carter Vickers.
Yeah,
first season.
These kind of guys, mate. But you look at, obviously, Don Mackay was accused of certain things when he was at Celtic, and there's been a non-disclosure that he can't really talk about it, isn't there? But his time, that's when we've seen change. You talk about Ange bringing in signings and stuff. 31st of December, before the window even opened, Kyogo, Ideguchi, Rio Hatate, 3 of them were announced. And it was on X, and it was all over the place. Celtic have signed these 3 Japanese guys, and the other side of the city in Scottish football was in turmoil. How are they signing players this early and whatever and blah blah. But it was basically saying, yeah, we've got these guys coming in, and they're in the door tomorrow. That's it. That's perfect. And that's the first time I'd seen that for, I don't know, ever. I mean, I can't remember back to being that proactive. And we always talk about you've got to be proactive rather than being reactive, and we seem to be a reactive club. You look at obviously carrying that, and if we'd have been proactive and brought in Sebastian Zanetti that couple of weeks earlier, I think he might have made a difference. If you'd had somebody up front who could actually score goals, maybe have Kelechi in there, he might have done it. Do you know what I mean? He might have done something, but it's all about just doing the business early. And I don't think there's people in there who are willing to push for that, who've got the knowledge to actually go out and do it. You get financial accountants and guys like this eyeballing players and agreeing what a price a player is. Who are they to put a price on a player? Who are they to turn around and go, oh, Paul Jordan, he's brilliant, we'll stick a $3 million price tag on him, but we'll need to square that with Dermot because we're not allowed to spend anything above that. Do you know what I mean? Who are they to put a price on anybody?
Sitting waiting on the WhatsApp group for the big thumbs up for Double D. It's not happening.
No.
Interesting enough, you used that January transfer window. We need a better transfer window than that this January.
100%.
So it would need to be something of an anomaly. That's where we are with the recruitment, the state of recruitment. Paddy, always a pleasure. Yeah. Will you join us again?
Of course I will. You need to join us though.
Absolutely, 100%. Let's do it.
Get across.
Thanks for joining us on Acsom, mate.
Pleasure.
Thanks for joining us again on A Celtic State of Mind. Join us next Friday at 6 o'clock for This is Acsom.